A gute Woche. Today in the Farbrengen this afternoon, the Rebbe Zolgazunsan brought out the specialty of this Shabbos, that it's Shabbos Pashas Matos-Masei, and together with it, it is also Shabbos Pashas Chazak. It's a Shabbos Chazak. And it's a special Chazak this time. Why? Because it is the Chazak and Chumash Bamidbar. And there's a major difference between the first four Chumashim and Chumash Dvarim. Chumash Dvarim is Mishnah Torah. It's a review of the entire Torah. And as the Chazal tell us, Mishnah Torah, Moshe mepi atzmai amroi, Moshe said Mishnah Torah. Takes Tosfos tells us that Moshe said it based on Ruach HaKodesh. But nonetheless, there's a difference between the first four Chumashim and the fifth Chumash. Memela today, when we have the Chazak, which we had this morning, the Chazak and Chumash Bamidbar, not only is it a Chazak and Chumash Bamidbar, but actually this is the Chazak on the first four Svarim of Chumash. And together with it being Shabbos Chazak, it's a Chazak and Matos-Masei together. As mentioned already many times, when two Sedras are combined, it's not the type that we have two Sedras. It becomes one Sedra, as we see that we do not call to the Torah more people on a Shabbos when we read a combination of two Sedras, as opposed to a Shabbos when we read only one Sedra. And it is in the Aliyah of Revi that combines these two Sedras. Person who is called to Revi makes the first bracha while it is still in the first sedra, like in our case in Pashas Matos, and he makes the last bracha when he's already into Pashas Masei. So being that today we have an unusual large sedra, which is large in quantity, in kamos, so we must say that this is also a very special sedra, large in eichus, in quality, especially that we know that every word in Torah Shebiksav is accounted for. So when we have such a large combination of two sedras that are turned into one sedra, so it's definitely something very special. And together with it, we also have to take in consideration the time when we read these sedras. When do we read it? We read it in the middle of the 3 weeks. And as we know, the 3 weeks have to have 3 Shabbosim. So Pashas Dvarim is always the last Shabbos of the 3 weeks. However, Pashas Masei, even when it is read in itself, is always the middle Shabbos of the 3 weeks. Some years Matos-Masei are separate. So when Matos-Masei are separate, Masei is the middle Shabbos. And as we know, as it's brought out in Halacha, the advantage when something is in the middle. So it's in the center of the 3 weeks. Bichlal, the entire union of the Bein HaMitzavim is a tremendous yerida, which the Rebbe did to Yidden. However, as everything in Kedusha, this Yerida is Tzeirech Aliyah. Why did the Rebbe give us this letdown? So that this should lead to an elevation, such a high elevation that without this Yerida we would never reach to it. Bechlal Yid, always Navedas Hashem, has to serve the Rebbe in the format of Mailam B'Kodesh. In Kedusha we always have to keep on escalating, we always have to keep on going higher. However, here it requires a special elevation, which comes in response to the letdown, in response to the Yerida. And in accordance to the Yerida, we have to have a very special Aliyah. And here the Rebbe asks, Bechlal, we know that the number of 3 is a very special number. As the expression goes in the Pasuk, Chut HaMeshulosh Loi B'Mheira Yinotek, when a rope is intertwined 3 times, it will not rip easily, it will not go apart easily. And we find it by Matan Torah, and the Gemara Matan Torah stresses the greatness of the number of 3. Torah was given in the 3rd month, the month of Sivan, counting from Nisan. Torah was given to a nation that's composed of Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim. Torah in itself consists of 3 parts, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, and as Rabbeinu Nisim Goyen comments Taka on the Gemara in Shabbos, where the Gemara discusses this inyan, and he lists many other special inyanim regarding number 3. So if so, the question arises, if 3 is such a special inyan, and such an outstanding inyan, how is it that we find an inyan which is so undesirable, the inyan of the 3 weeks, that this also should relate to the inyan of 3? In order for us to understand that, the Rebbe continued, we will understand the specialty of number 3 as we find it in the creation of the world. The way the Rebbe created the world, first day was Yom Rishon, and it's Yom Echad, because that day HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Yochid Ba'olamai, he was the only one in the world. However, when it came to the second day, and the second day, that is when the waters were split, the waters were divided. And on that day, we notice in Chumash, it is not mentioned the word Toiv. Every day of creation, it is mentioned the word Toiv. Toiv, good. The Rebbe saw whatever he did was good. However, on the day of Monday, it does not mention Toiv. Why? Because on that day, there was an inyan of pirud, an inyan of separation, an inyan of machloikis. And wherever there's an inyan of machloikis, we cannot mention Toiv. Where do we mention Toiv? In the third day. The third day has not only a regular Toiv, but it's hukval boiki Toiv. It's double the inyan of Toiv. And when we say Toiv is mentioned twice on Tuesday, it doesn't mean once for Monday and once for Tuesday. It means that the Tuesday in itself, is the third day, is so special that it has an unlimited amount of Toiv. Why? Because Tuesday has this specialty in it. What is the advantage of number 3? When we have two inyanim that contradict one another, the third straightens it out. As the expression goes, we say in davening, Shnei Ksuvim Hamakrishim Zeh, two psukim that contradict one another, and there is the third pasuk, which is Machriya Beineim, which decides amongst the two. This advantage of straightening out where there is a contradiction, in other words, the inyan of Shalom, in other words, this is so great and so outstanding that this calls for an unlimited amount of Toiv. And here the Rebbe continued, when we're talking about machloikis, when we're talking about separation, even in the highest level of separation, which means, as the Mishnah tells us in Novis, that there's a concept of a machloikis l'shem shamayim. And what is that? When we have a difference of opinion between Hillel and Shammai. And as the Mishnah itself continues, this is something which is soifal lehiskayim. This is something which will remain in existence. What do we mean it remains in existence? That now we know the halacha is according to Beis Hillel. However, when Mashiach will come, the halacha will be according to Beis Shammai. And all this is explained in Chassidus, that the source of Hillel is Chesed, the source of Shammai is Gvura, and that is why Hillel is always more lenient as opposed to the opinion of Shammai. And the Rebbe continues, it's brought in Svarim that the word Moshe abbreviates Moshe, Shammai, Hillel. Which means that the machloikis, wherever we find an inyan of Shammai and Hillel, where they have a disagreement, where they have a dispute, this relates to the concept of Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. What are they disputing about? They are disputing in Yanim, which Moshe related from Sinai in Yanim of Torah. And Shammai and Hillel have their differences of opinion. And here comes Shammai before Hillel, as the Gemara tells us, that the house of Hillel was so respectful to the people of Shammai that they would always mention the opinion of Shammai before themselves. So that is the abbreviation, Moshe, Shammai, and Hillel. But nonetheless, wherever, getting back to our inyan, this is still considered an inyan of Machlokes, an inyan of Pirut. And what is the greatest advantage? When we straighten out the Pirut, when it's ironed out, and that is the idea of Shlishi, that is the advantage of number 3. And that is the specialty of 3. And that is also the specialty of the third Beis HaMikdash. Third Beis HaMikdash will have revelations of Get L'chait that in no way can be compared to the first two. The first Beis HaMikdash is Vayeshev Shloim Al Kisei Hashem, and it was a tremendous revelation of godliness. Even the second Beis HaMikdash, where there were 5 inyanim missing in the second Beis HaMikdash as opposed to the first Beis HaMikdash, but nonetheless we find, Pasuk says, God liyeh kavod habayis hazeh, that there are advantages in the second Beis HaMikdash as opposed to the first Beis HaMikdash. However, the third Beis HaMikdash will supersede all of them. And this is the same concept when we're saying about the inyan of the 3 weeks. The specialty of the 3 weeks is that it is through these 3 weeks that we reach to tremendous revelations, tremendous inyanim, to the inyan of Geulah. And here the Rebbe teaches, what is the teich? Shloisha de Poronusa, which we normally teach for the 3 weeks, that is 3 undesirable weeks. Teaches the Rebbe on the contrary. There's another teich in it. Poronusa does not only mean something, an inyan of punishment, an inyan of something undesirable. Poronisa is Meloshim, Isperia, is an expression in the Zohar. It's Meloshim, revealing. In other words, it is through the Aveda of these 3 weeks that we will reveal the goal, put an end to Golas, and it will lead us and reveal for us the Geula Shleima by the coming of Mashiach and giving us the third Beis HaMikdash. And this is also reflected in the specialty of this Shabbos. We come to the end of the Chumash. In the Chumash it's like a printed once Chazak, but the minig of Yidden is that we say 3 times Chazak, and we don't just say it, but we scream it out very loud, a much louder voice than we usually learn. Even when we are involved in pilpul of learning, where people usually express themselves in loud tones, but this Chazak is said yet louder. And when we look at the contents of the end of the Sedra, first of all, we have the specialty of this Sedra that deals also with an Inyan of Shloisha, with the Inyan of the Keni, Knizi, Kadmoni. These are the 3 countries which will be added on to Eretz Yisrael with the coming of Mashiach, and then we will have conquered not only 7 nations, then we will have conquered 10 nations with these additional 3. And when we look at the very end of the Sedra, which the very end of the Sedra concludes with Yarden Yerechoi, the entering of Eden into Eretz Yisrael, until they reach the level of Yarden Yerechoi. That means we are going out of Mitzrayim, out of not only Mitzrayim and Gashmiis, but Mitzrayim and Ruchniis. We're going out of all types of limitations and boundaries until we are reaching the level of Yarden Yerechoi. What is the Inyan of Yerechoi? Touches the Rebbe Yerechoi is Meloshen Moirach V'doin. We find Mashiach is entitled, as the title, Moirach V'doin. He will smell and judge. Through his scent, he will be able to judge. The same Yerechoi, this is also an indication, Meloshen Reach, on the coming of Mashiach. And that is the specialty of these 3 weeks. On the contrary, through that proper Avodah in these 3 weeks, this will lead to the Inyan of Geula. That Golas will take an end. We're already enough in Golas. The Rebbe said, Daloi Golas, it's already 1900 years that we're in Golas, and it's highest point already that the Rebbe should take us a lot of Golas and should show us revealed Chsodim, Chesed, and that is primarily by taking us out of Golas and bringing Mashiach. The Rebbe also spoke very, very strongly about utilizing the 9 days to make a siyum. We should make siyumim and mesechtes during these 9 days, each and every one of the 9 days, even Erev Tisha B'Av and Tisha B'Av. We can make a siyum on mesechtes that are suitable to learn at that time. And the Rebbe says we are still in Golas, and the Rebbe is waiting for us to do something additional. And as the Rambam writes, that by one good deed which a Yid does, this can affect himself and the entire world. It can overweigh himself and the entire world. And Memela, by us being involved in making siyumim, says the Rebbe, this will lead to it that the Rebbe will also make a siyum. And what type of a siyum? The Rebbe will make a siyum on Golas. The Rebbe will end the Golas. And we will make siyumim and mesechtes, starting from mesechtes brachas. And what is the biggest bracha we can think of? The biggest bracha is that the Rebbe will take us out of Golas. We'll make a bracha on Geula. And the taich which the Rebbe brought on behalf of the son of the Maggid of Mizrich, Rebbe Avram the Malach, that he taiched the beginning of the Mishnah in brachas, which brachas begins me'emes ha'koyer nishma ba'arv, and when can we begin reading Krishma at night? So the Malach taiched, he's known by the title the Malach, Rebbe Avram. So he touched me'emasai does not only mean when, me'emasai means out of fear. When we have Eimah for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is when we can read Shema even ba'arvis, even when it is dark. Dark spiritually, we can also realize the concept of Shema Yisrael when we have the proper fear for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is the beginning of Shas. And Shas ends off with Tana Devei Eliyahu, a beraisa which was learned in the yeshiva of Eliyahu. If it was learned by in his yeshiva, he himself definitely also participated in this saying. Kol hashena halachis b'chol yom. Anybody that learns halachis every day, muftach lo yishuhu ben olam haba, is guaranteed to be rewarded with olam haba. And there's an interesting Tosfos, the very last Tosfos in Shas, which Tosfos there says that there are many svarim where this quotation is omitted from the Shas. However, Rashi does bring it, as we see there's like a commentary from Rashi on the word. Rashi touches up what is the meaning of halachos. Kol hashayna halachos. So Rashi touches what is the meaning of halachos. And Tosfos adds on that Rabbeinu Tam, who was the grandson of Rashi, and usually we know that there are always disputes in learning between Rabbeinu Tam, Tosfos Bechlal, and Rabbeinu Tam, and Rashi, that Rabbeinu Tam corrected in his Sefer that it should also conclude like Rashi has it here. So in other words, this goes back to what we spoke earlier. Even though Rashi and Tosfos usually are in dispute, here it comes to a yet higher madrega. Here it comes to the madrega, like we discussed, the advantage of three, where there are two that usually contradict one another, and here they are all under the same opinion. And what does Tosfos say? Why is it takif that Shas should finish with this quotation, just like we find by Nevi'im that they finish with words of praise and Tanchumin? The same thing, it's appropriate for Shas to finish with words of praise and Tanchumin. The Rebbe concluded that we shouldn't have to wait for the weeks of Iftar Tisha B'Av when we get the Nechama, the condolence from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shiva de Nechemte. But right away, we already benched the month of Av. And what is the name of this month? Menachem Av. The month begins right away with Nichumen, that the Rebbe should put an end to Golas, and the Rebbe should take us out of this Golas and bring Mashiach. A good